Welcome to Mental Health Mini number 14, where we'll talk about brain anatomy. The human brain can be categorized by a lot of different structures. For example, we can categorize it based on the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain, or we can categorize it based on the different lobes, like the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe. We can break it down between the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the spinal cord, or the right side of the brain versus the left side of the brain. To start off, we'll start talking about the forebrain, which is the cerebrum and the diencephalon. The cerebrum consists of the right and left hemispheres, which communicate via the corpus callosum. It consists of the four lobes that I just mentioned. It also has the basal ganglia, which is the striatum, pallidum, and substantia nigra, and the subthalamic nucleus. It contains gray matter, which is found in the deep cerebral tissue of the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia is also involved with voluntary movements. The cerebrum is covered by gray matter, which is called the cerebral cortex. And the gray matter is neurons that are gray in color. So this allows for neuronal communication and higher level thinking. And it helps form both the gyri and the sulci. The gyri are the folds, whereas the sulci are the groove between folds. And this increases the surface area of the cerebrum so that more neuronal activity can occur. Then in the diencephalon, we see the lower structures of the brain, like the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the limbic system. And we'll break all this down. So as far as the hemispheres go, like I said, the cerebrum can be categorized as right hemisphere or left hemisphere. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body and is also involved with our regulation of affect, behavior, creative use, spatial perceptual functioning, intuition, random sequencing, nonverbal language, so that would be like writing, facial perception, things like that, impulse, imagination, and adventurousness. The left side of the brain controls the right side of the body and is involved with logic and analytical thought, problem solving, detail-oriented tasks, ordered sequencing, verbal communication, perception of caution, planning, and math and science interpretation. The lobes of the cerebrum include the frontal lobe, which is involved with voluntary body movements, speaking, thinking, judgment, expression of feelings, personality, morality, and spirituality. The parietal lobe is involved with perception and interpretation of touch, pain, taste, body positioning, and pressure. It also allows us to have perception of our joints and body positioning. It regulates visceral sensations and language interpretation. The temporal lobe is involved with hearing, short-term memory, smell, and emotions. And the occipital lobe is involved with visual perception and visual interpretation. The diencephalon includes the thalamus, which integrates sensory input and blocks out sensations to improve focus. And it also contains most of our dopamine. So it's the origin for a lot of neuropsychiatric disorders. The hypothalamus has neuronal control of our autonomic nervous system. So it regulates our blood pressure, circadian rhythms, and pituitary gland release of antidiuretic hormone, oxytocin, and other hormones. The limbic system includes the amygdala, the mammillary body, the olfactory tract, hypothalamus, hippocampus, and fornix. This controls our autonomic, endocrine, and somatic functioning, and it also helps us to process ambiguous emotions. In the midbrain, we call this the mesencephalon. This ranges from the pons to the hypothalamus, and you can see where that's at. So it's the upper part of the brainstem, and it integrates our reflexes and is responsible for balance. And then lastly, we have the hindbrain, which includes the pons, the medulla, and the cerebellum. The pons is located between the midbrain and the medulla and controls cranial nerves 5 through 8. It also assists with sleeping and dreaming, respirations and skeletal tone, and it connects the ascending and descending neuronal transmission between the brainstem and the cerebellum and cortex. The medulla is the structure between the spinal cord and the pons, and it helps with ascending and descending neuronal communication. It controls cranial nerves 9 through 12 and regulates homeostasis. So it helps to regulate heart rate, blood pressure, and respirations. It's also involved in assisting with reflexes such as swallow, sneezing, coughing, and vomiting. The cerebellum controls muscle tone and coordination, as well as posture and experience of equilibrium. And those are the different brain structures that we'll refer to as we talk more about psychiatric disorders and how it's impacted by the brain.